Hello and welcome to Technique Friday. Now I've had a number of requests to show you how I use and make my own flesh tones, and also to how I also create my flesh tone glaze. Now the glazing part of it is really simple, so all I'm going to do is just dive straight in, educate you a little bit about the base colours that I use to make up my own flesh tones, which I use quite a lot of, and the sorts of different colours that you can put in and take out depending on your personal preference for tones of skin, and then how that looks on a white sheet of paper. So when you're looking at glazing, the different mediums that you can use as glazes, so that hopefully you don't need to go out and actually use something else. You can use what you already have to create a glaze that works every bit as well as actually going out and buying a glazing medium. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so when we're mixing a paint, and I'll just zoom in here so we can focus on this one area that I'm working on. I actually have some natural skin tones, some unbleached titanium, I have some transparent umber, I have some Australian sienna. I particularly like that, but you can see that it's much yellower. I also have some skin tone light, which is a pink, and I have some sand, which is more of a yellowy kind of. Now I like to mix up a little bit, and I like to use sand as my base. But this is all about mixing something that suits you and what you would like. Now I'm actually just going to use like a paddle pop stick stirrer. My son saves them from me when he goes and gets coffee and things like that, and to mix these up. And I'm going to add a little bit of the skin tone, and I'm going to put these separately so that you can see them in there. So you can see how that's a bit darker. I'm going to add a little bit of the transparent umber, but just a little bit, and the fact that it's transparent means that it's just really pigment and does not have a lot of binders in it. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is actually have a look at these three together. So when I start mixing them up, you can see that those three colours together are making a lovely flesh. And so if I was to just put this on a piece of paper, I've got a little envelope here, I'm just going to scrape that across it. You can see it against a really white paper. Okay, so there's a flesh. And I just used a little bit of a skin tone in the Jo Sonia, so it's Skin Tone Base Series 1. I used a little bit of some J. Burrows cheap acrylic paint sand, which is a great base, and I used a little bit of transparent umber, and you saw the rough amounts that I used. Now say that I like this, but I actually want to make it a little bit pinker, and so as I go along I'm going to get this scraper and just scrape off a bit that came out. So with pinks I don't add an awful lot in. I like to just, and I've managed to get most of it on the side. There, we've just put too much in, but I just want to give you an idea of how that works. And you can always, if you're making up a batch of this, I mean, I keep good jars. I mean, that's just an IKEA jar. Let's now have a look at the effect that that pink has made going in. So you can see the two shades of that together in their variations. So if I just keep mixing that in their variations when I just scrape that. So one's significantly pinker than the other. And you may make up 2 batches. You may make up an initial batch, that's your light base colour. I always recommend having a light base colour. And look, as a guide, if you have neo colours, right? Let me just go to the flesh tone. The flesh tone in neo colour is a really good guide for my mind. So I've just put the neo colour there. Now it's lighter, but remember it disperses and becomes thinner when you activate it. So I've put it on reasonably hard there just so that you can see the pigment. But when I disperse that, it's actually going to look very, very similar to this paint here. Now I can then lighten that up again and just add some more sand to it. But it will still be pink because I've changed the chemical component of it by adding the pink. Now the only way that I can take that pink out, and it's now going a bit more apricot because this is, of course is a bit yellow, so you add the yellow to the pink and it's more apricot. So let's just add a little bit more of that in, and let's put that on our sheet here. And we have that same colour again, lightened up with more of the sand, more in line with this but still darker again. And like I said, it's all a matter of choice and exactly what you want. Now say I really want to give that a yellow tone. I'm just going to put the tiniest amount, I'm just going to put it on the top here of this Australian sienna. Now I use that a lot watered down, actually straight on my faces, but I'm just going to add it in here. And what that does is, for me, it gives a real bronzed sort of sun-kissed look, which I just love. And I think as an undertone, you never actually see that tone so much. It's an undertone. I tend to then cover it up with pinker glazes, but it's always there and it does contribute. Let's have a look and see how that little bit, just that little dollop, changed the composition of it. So now you can see that that's yellow. So this is the first one, the second one, third, add in, and it's yellow. So now we've got all these different skin-based tones, and it is all about what you want. Now we have, that's mixing flesh tones. So essentially you get some, you can use an unbleached titanium, you can use a little bit of the pink. This is a Matisse Skin Tone Light, and it is a series 1. It is more pink. It gets to a little bit of the judgment that you use. I would go a transparent umber first up, or a raw sienna. And I like these sand colours, but the unbleached titanium is not that dissimilar to those. So, and of course, having a look, I think the Jo Sonjas have a nice range, but in America or in other countries you may have other brands that have great ranges in flesh. You can always start them, and they're great for art journaling. And really well-known artists like Jane Davenport, they often use pre-mixed flesh tones. They can mix their own, and they often do it in pastels and watercolours and stuff like that. But when they're using acrylics, they often just mix their own, use a pre-mix, because it's much easier, and if you don't want to have to think about mixing it all up. And when you mix your batches, like that's really light compared to any of these. You have a look at the colour of that. More like the first colour. Yeah. So when you're mixing any of these, you then have to think about, okay, well, what if I run out halfway through a project? So, you know, and no 2 batches of skin tone are ever going to look the same. You're never going to use exactly the same quantities if you're just dolloping it out and not measuring it exactly. Some of you who are super organised might measure it exactly. And you might have make yourself up a flesh tone recipe that you really, really love. And if you're really highly organised, by all means do it. But I'm not one of those people. I do it on how I'm feeling at the time and what I'm thinking and feeling. And at any time I know I can just sit down and mix it all up. Or I mix it on the page. So I'll use a pre-mixed flesh, but that pre-mixed flesh is really just a slightly pink sand. Like really, it's not that dissimilar. And so that's my first layer, but it's only a first layer, and I may use neo colors, I may use pencils, I may use more of these acrylic paints when they're wet and white, and join them all together. Now the exciting part is making glazes. Okay, so glazes are where, and I'll demonstrate this, so where we get, I'll take all the water out of my brush, we have a completely neat product here, no glaze. So that is your product. That is an acrylic paint with nothing added, no additional additives or mediums added. Right? And that's what it looks like. Now, if I'm to mix in some, there are two products that you can really use for this, and these are mediums and not additives. Additives are different, and I'll go into that later. Matte medium is an acrylic binder medium. It is what acrylic paint is made of, so you are not going to compromise the chemical nature of the paint by adding acrylic matte medium to this. I always like working in matte. I don't use a gloss medium, I don't use a satin medium, I always use a matte. You mix media, you always want to be able to have some grip for the next layer, so always matte. The other thing that I also have, and that I do use, and I don't have it in the Liquitex brand, but I do have it in the Jo Sonja's brand, is a glazing medium. So this is a clear glaze medium, and this is a light surface sealer as well. And what this does, it's medium transparent, so it says that you can apply it undiluted as a light sealer. You can also use it as a general painting medium where transparent colour is desired. So this particular thing is you can create glazes or wood stains, begin with a ratio of 1 part paint to 3 parts medium. So you always need to have a look at the directions on the product. So this is 1 part paint, 3 parts medium. Now if you don't want it as transparent as that, you can reduce it, but I wouldn't go any higher than that. Alright? Now with the matte gel, with the matte medium, you can thin this, but you can mix it with any acrylic colour or Liquitex mediums. You cannot mix it with oils, and let me tell you, never use any kind of medium that's oil based with acrylic paints. They hate each other. Chemically, they will fight each other and they will not work. This does not actually go into exactly how much you can use, but I like the general adage 3 parts to 1 part, but I tend to just go, and I know that that's a lot, so if I was to get 1 brush stroke and put it there and then add another 3 and mix them together, that's what they mean by that. I tend to just tip them in because I know that I don't usually use it that heavily transparent, so I don't have to worry about myself that way. So what I'm going to do is just pull out some paint and pop out that paint into there, and then we've got this paint here, and then I'm going to show you the differences in the two. Now you can use additives as well, and you can use things like retarders. So you can have a look there and see, yeah, I'm not putting any more. I probably haven't even done a 50-50 ratio yet of that. And with this, I can go 3 times as much, remember, but I'm just going to go like a 50-50 ratio. Now I'm going to mix this in, and you've got to make sure it's fully mixed. This is not something that you mix on the page. And the other thing is, see how I've pre-mixed my colours and then added the medium? Don't mix your colours and the medium all in together all at once. It just does, it stays a bit streaky for some reason. Okay, so there's a glaze. Let's bring this in and pop it next to here. Can you see that it's more translucent? You can see more of the paper through it, even with me going over it. much more transparent. I'm just going to clean my brush out and mix up the other one. That's with the matte medium. So that gives you a glaze. You can use a matte medium. Excuse my cough. So we'll mix this one in. This is with glazing medium. And what I find is that this is a bit runnier. And again, you do your colours before, you mix all your colours together, and then you mix the glazing medium's the last thing you mix in. Alright, let's just pop it down the bottom here. Now that's paler again. It's more transparent again. And you can then also use your glaze over the top. So this is that same glaze over the top and over the top here. The glaze over the matte medium. Just to give you an idea on the layering that you can achieve with that. So what that's demonstrating is that if you use matte medium as a glaze, that generally your glaze, and this is a matter of choice, but never go more than 3 parts to 1, more than that as a ratio, because you can then muck around with the chemical composition. But you've got, this is opaque, this is semi-transparent, this is transparent. So this is matte medium, this is glazing medium. So the glazing medium I did a 50-50 ratio, and the matte medium I did a 50-50 ratio roughly. And with the paint it's just straight paint, and that gives you an idea of how they work. And then you can just pop them. So I'm not going to waste any of this because this is very light. But what I'm actually going to do now is scoop that up. And I have a spatula. And I'm going to scoop it up and pop it into my glaze. And it will just mix with that and glaze and create not the same colour, but it would the lighter colour that's in there. Now I used a glazing medium with that, so that'll work very well. I can use a glazing medium. I'm just putting the whole lot in there, and then I'm going to mix it up with this catalyst tool scraper, which also works really great for scraping out palettes. Or you could use a mini silicone spoon for this, which I have one of those as well, and you can get them cheap at the dollar store. And so all I'm going to do now, you can see the darkness there, so you can see the dark where I've just put the dark in and then the light. So I'm just going to mix that up, mix that all together, create a completely new colour for me. And this is the pre-mixed glaze. I've just got it in a jar. Make sure your container is completely airtight. And the next time I go to use that, it'll be slightly different. So let's have a look and see what it looks like now. Let's just put in that new mix. So it's still lighter. Than any of those. A little bit yellower now. But it's, like I said, it's all 6 of 10s of the other. You can always blend them. You can have a lot of fun playing with glazes. Now additives like retarder will thin paint, but you have to use it in the strict quantities because it's not the same chemical component as the paint. It is not a binder medium. It is something that simply retards paint, or even though it will thin and glaze, make that paint into a glaze and retard it so that you can work with it like oils. You need to make sure that you use it in exactly the right components, and then also make sure that you don't add anything else to it either, because that can then muck with the chemical component of the paint, and you don't want to have your paint cracking off its surface, not adhering, doing all sorts of things like that. So it's something that you need to be making sure that whatever product you're using, you're following the manufacturer's guide on how to do it. But also, I hope I've taught you now that you can essentially take 3 basic colors. So you can take a sand color, you can take a pink, and you can take an umber, and then add those together in varying different quantities to get a base. This is a Caucasian kind of face skin tone. If I wanted to make dark tones, that's a completely different lesson, and it involves a hell of a lot more science than this does, I can tell you. Doing dark tones in faces is actually really quite difficult, and even the best of us, sometimes we work at it and work at it and work at it to get it right. So there's my basic thing on glazing and flesh tones, how I mix my flesh tones, and then how I create glazes, which I then keep and use all the time, you see on my journal pages. So ciao for now, until next week. Learn something new today, it keeps you young.